Welcome back, traders and investors, to Benzinga's pre-market prep, brought to you by MarketFi, the best of biotech show. We're going to start out with Christian Tharp, a MarketFi maven and the author of the 5-Star Stock Watch. Christian, how you doing this morning?
Fantastic. How about you?
We're doing great here. Little action in the markets, but the first question, now you probably get this asked like, 10, 15 times a day. Are we as the bubble burst in the biotech market? And we'll just go basis here. The IBB. Go ahead, Christian. You got the floor.
Absolutely. Well, that is certainly the question of probably not just the day, the month, the year, the last 2 years. Biotech has done fantastic, and you're absolutely right. I kind of use the IBB as my little bellwether to kind of gauge things, but I also like to look at, say, maybe the biggest dog in the fight like a Gilead. But when I look at IBB, I have to admit last month I was a little worried because, of course, as you know, my expertise in this field is more of the technical analysis or the analysis of the stocks. And so when I ask myself the big picture questions such as, is biotech in a bubble? And I look at my gauge for biotech in the form of the IBB. Last month, I pan out and I look at, let's say, monthly bars or monthly candles for those of you that like a good candle pattern. And I'm not too terribly thrilled about what formed last month. Biotech, the IBB, fantastic run. And you kind of keep watching to see if there's a subtle sign of running out of gas. Last month, those of your listeners that are familiar with candlesticks, we got ourselves a beautiful version of a shooting star candle, meaning that, things were looking great to start the month. Midway through the month, things were looking fantastic. Then we gave up virtually everything we gained. Now, when it comes to things like that, we would like to see the confirmation of them. Confirmation of something like that would be a fall, hopefully, or not hopefully, for biotech investors, not hopefully, but to confirm the candle would be something if we saw a lower close this month or a lower push this month or say next month, which luckily has not happened. We've had actually a pretty good month so far, but we also have a whole half a month to go. So as of right now, I'm a little cautious, a little nervous about what I saw last month, and a lot of the things I've seen with individual biotech names haven't broken down. So when you look at last month's low on the IBB, you're looking at something around, the 334 area. I think the first thing we want to see to keep this, if we are in a bubble, alive, we'd like to see ourselves hold that mark around 334 and preferably hold the gains we have. But I will say last month certainly sent some caution within me.
It was just so quick. Like I was looking at like Biogen specifically, and we'd get your thoughts on this one too, because they came out with that good news back on March the 20th. You can see the big gap up in the chart. But that was the day that we turned too. We made the highs that day, and then within 3 days, we'd given back all of those gains and actually continued to drift lower. Now, we did hold the 400 there on Biogen, and actually, I don't actually mind this chart here right now because it's kind of almost like a little bit of a cup and handle forming there. Not that I'm a big pattern trader here, but first, what are your thoughts on Biogen? Because it's kind of your leader, is it not?
Yeah, that is one of them. That is the Biogen I like to look at, Amgen, I like to watch Gilead. The IBB, obviously, and, biotech ETFs are great, but I also like to look, how are the leaders doing? And I think, if I remember correctly, the last time I was on your show, it was when Biogen made that pop. I think we were talking about it that morning, and since then, it's been all downhill. Biogen is something that concerns me because you look at the IBB, for example, so biotech industry as a whole, and it has had a pretty good couple weeks here. It's been a nice little stretch. I look at Biogen, I look at one of the big guys not really taking part in that move. In other words, if that was a real strong, meaty move, I'd love to see the Biogens of the world really kind of lead the way, and the Gileads lead the way. So that's another one of those subtle things that certainly doesn't mean every biotech investor out there needs to go, mortgage, sell everything and close up shop and hunker down. But it's one of those things where I say to myself, Biogen was one of the ones leading the way in February and March. Now look at us. We're slacking a little bit. So that's one of the ones when I was thinking about what are some of the biotech names that, I'm not a big fan of right now. Biogen is actually one of them.
In the chart. Go ahead, Dennis.
I was going to say, what about Gilead? Because last time you were on our show, it was kind of in the doghouse there. And it's still kind of in the doghouse, but if we look the last week or two, we'll actually go over the last 2 weeks, stock's quietly gained here 7 or 8 points and is actually up at a 2-month high where a lot of these other ones aren't. Think Gilead is showing some life?
Yeah, I like that better than Biogen. When I pan out again, I kind of look at it and say, I wish you were one of the ones leading the way. However, that being said, really hold Gilead and hold Biogen side by side, and compare that to the IBB, and notice how, I like Gilead better because it has taken part. When investors and traders are wanting to get into biotech, this is one of the names that seems to be of interest, which is something we would like to see, as where Biogen seems to be stalling over the last week or two. So I certainly like Gilead better. I like Gilead. You can kind of see we're stalling in this 105 area the past 2 or 3 months. 95-ish seems to be what's holding us up. So, if we push above that, I think the last time I was on, we talked about that 110 mark up top that we hit as resistance a few times. I think if we can get above 105, we get ourselves a run to 110. Breaking above 110 will be a great sign for Gilead.
Christian, I know you're a real student of technical analysis, and you look at it longer term than I do, and it's probably really helps you with your trading and your long term profitability. But what I like to look at, something like the IBB here, is you had the big decline, right? You had the all-time high at 374.97, and you broke down to that 334 area, and you've cleared the mid-range here. You've cleared 354. I mean, and tell me, if I'm flawed in my analysis here, is that as long as we hold above 354, then I think we have a chance to maybe go back up to the all-time highs. If not, that there's a very good chance that was just a correction of the big down move. And if you want to do another projection, from the recent highs, that would take us down into the lower 300s.
Yeah, absolutely. The 350 mark, that was, when we were kind of talking about our analysis in the biotech trader and everything, 350 was the number we said, look, if we can get through that, then we should have more signs of life going higher. The question is this, somewhat of an upward correction in a downward move? I think on the downside, one of the things that when I look at any stock, whether biotech or otherwise, or if I'm looking at the IBB or the market, one of the things I always ask myself is what seems to be important to that particular security. So, for example, one person might be paying attention to the 50-day moving average on a stock, but then if you look at that stock, the stock doesn't actually seem to respect or react or care about its 50 days. So what I like to do is take, whether it be the IBB or a stock on its own individual merits, and say, well, what matters to it? Well, when you look at the IBB, what appears to matter to that ETF is certainly the 50-day moving average. All right. With the exception of the dip in October, you'll notice there's been there's probably 10 different tests of that 50-day. Sure enough, if you look at our two lows at the end of March and the beginning of April, both times was a test of the 50-day. So if the market were to go through a pullback, we always had a good couple weeks here in the IBB. First level, I would agree with you completely. I'd love to see us hold 350. But then if we continue to decline, then I start looking at that 50-day moving average again that's held us up and say, I just want to hold that. Currently sitting around 342 or so. So I would think as long as we hold that, trend is still in force. If we push significantly below that, and then of course that 334 barrier that I mentioned, then I'm probably thinking, all right, the floodgates might open up. We might head ourselves down to the 200-day and or the trend line of support that we've held for about 2 years, which currently sits around 280.
Christian, let's jump into some other individual issues. And I know you focus on a lot of different charts, and you've probably got some on your radar here. What is on the Christian Tharp radar here, not only for today, but going forward in the biotech sector?
Sure, absolutely. Let's start with one that I'm a little worried about here. Anybody that's in Jazz Pharmaceuticals, Jazz, J-A-Z-Z. Okay, that is a stock that if you pull it up on, roughly a 1 year, one and a half year chart, you're going to notice that's been traveling in a relatively nice channel upward.
Yeah.
Right. You've got yourself a test in September. You got a test in November. You got a test in December. You got a test in March. So Jazz, the market is telling me that topside resistance matters. So that topside resistance sits roughly around 193. We're sitting at 190. Right. So, of course, there's no guarantees, but I would say if I was in Jazz, I'd certainly be putting in some protective stops in or looking at possibly locking in gains once we push around that 193 mark. If we break through it, hey, great, party's on. But if you go with probabilities and what tends to happen, well, what has happened every time we've approached that resistance? We've dropped, and we've dropped a lot. So I'd be cautious with that one. Another one that I'm not a big fan of right now, PCRX, Psira.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the support area in the general 85 area. Not a fan of what it did yesterday.
Yeah, really took it out.
And if you got some short traders on the line today, that's one that if you like short trading, if you like what you see there, that certainly doesn't look good. But then on the flip side, some names that I think do look good. I certainly like ALNY, okay, Alpha Lima November Yankee for those listening.
Yep.
I love this push through 120. I think that looks good. I like to see us hold that 120, but at the end of the day, this is a stock that has been, outperforming the IBB, outperforming the market, outperforming its peers. So I kind of, when I know a lot of people are nervous about the market right now, S&P having a tough time breaking out of that little triangle it's in, not confirming the Dow's high yesterday. There's always that nervousness there. Then if you want to get into the space, I'd say you want to get into those leaders like ALNY or Blue. Your boy Blue, BLUE.
That just keeps going. That Bluebird.
It won't stop. So no matter what the market does, no matter what the IBB has done, even when this pulled back in March, just like ALNY, it didn't take the brunt like, say, some of the other names did. So you're a little bit more protected, especially as an investor. And then I also have one that I would say I would probably watch, and this is one that's a bigger name, Amgen. Everybody in biotech knows Amgen.
Yeah.
Right? That's one that I like to watch because it has taken part in the biotech rally the last couple of weeks. And as I mentioned before, I love seeing, something on a chart that tells me what to do. I don't have to guess, like this is a problem or this is a good thing. Amgen seems to be stalling right around this, 172 area. It's done it 2 or 3 times. So this is one that if someone's looking to get in biotech, they're looking to get in Amgen, this stock pushing through that area up there I think would make great sense. So there's a couple good, there's a couple bad, for those, whatever suits your needs.
I got to ask you about a stock here that I know Dennis was involved in for quite some time.
Oh, no. You're going to ask over?
What do you think about this chart? And
Ova Science he's talking about. OVAS.
Oh my God! Look at what this thing did, and I'm not laughing at you, Dennis. You did great on the trade. I just, I
held 100 shares for fun, and he's gonna make me have that. He's gonna laugh at me for that 100 shares forever here. So I bought it at 10 just to give you this was when I bought at 10. I sold half at 20 because I was playing with the house's money. And then I sold the majority of the rest of them at 43. I watched it go to 56, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna hold on to 100 shares here, let it ride, because I've already taken way more out than I put into it, and I watched it fall like 20 points in 2 weeks. So I was like, man, when you stop and think about it, that was $2,000.
Yeah, that fall. This was actually one. It's funny you should bring it up because we actually traded this twice. Now I want to be clear that it's more of a trade more than anything. One thing that I think was really gross was when the stock broke 40 support at the end of March, and I think this is one of those things. The reason why it makes it in my watch list is because wow, that's a great 40 level there. So either A, I can buy it. B, if we break it, we're probably going lower. Let's look to get short.
Right.
But as the stock fell, what I liked about it, I'm really torn on the stocks because on one hand, we made a trade. We made a nice, good, positive, quick, short-term trade. On the other hand, we kind of liked what we saw yesterday for a slight move higher, maybe from like 32.5 up to 35, and it completely reversed on us. So certainly challenging in this area. But on one hand, not really a fan overall, not only of the break of the 40 and the nasty slide, but even though my trades are based on specifics like, say, a price or an average or a candle, those technical analysis things, I also like to take the temperature of the water. And so when I look at momentum indicators, say, for example, on the RSI in this particular case, your listeners can notice how, take, for example, an RSI, one of the things we look at, for example, would be like a bear and a bull range. Something in a security in a bull range, one might expect to hold the 40 area on the RSI. So you'll notice ever since June of last year, since this stock embarked on its run, the RSI has always found support right around 40. Here recently in October, again in February, twice in March, it's held that 40. So one of the things it tells us, well, is the price action worse than it looks or better than it looks, is when, say, an RSI would say push below, and you'll notice on OVAS, there's that push below 40 in March, which tells us the stock seems to be moving into more of like a bear mode versus the bull mode that it was in way back in May of last year when it broke out of that. So big picture-wise, this seems like a trend lower. As a trade, we kind of thought it was recovering a little bit because that same RSI had a positive divergence over the past couple of weeks. So we thought, this was like a good sign. If we push above 30, let's go ahead and see if we can get a quick trade. We did. Now it's in a spot where I'm a little nervous about it overall, to be quite honest with you. I mean, it's hard to say what it's telling me. I thought yesterday it really looked like it was taking another leg up to that 35 we expected, and then it completely reversed on us. So I'm sitting tight personally on this one until it shows me something better.
Starts cutting through 30 again, you're going to get nervous on this too. And maybe I should consider cutting out my last 100 shares if it starts cutting through 30.
Yeah, I would certainly throw a stop or something underneath that last little dip in the around the 27. If it breaches that, I think that we're in real trouble.
Just one other question. I know you've mentioned, RSI, you've mentioned moving averages, 50-day, 200-day. With this one, I mean, when you were looking at it, did you kind of look at a little bit of seller's exhaustion here? Because, man, you were trading, 1.5, 2 million shares, and then it really started to dissipate as the stock started to make a series of higher lows, and it looks like it's in jeopardy today. But since you hit that 27.87 low, I noticed you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 higher lows. Is that something, volume or, a series of higher lows? Is that something that's part of your repertoire?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that is one of the reasons why we kind of liked what we saw yesterday, because you'll also notice essentially in the last, 4 days, the stocks created somewhat of equal or lower highs. So our thought was that if we had maybe the potential for a small little mini, pennant or flag that was forming here over the last week and a half. And we were waiting after we took a quick gain on our first trade. We thought if it pushed higher yesterday, that should give us what we thought was an additional run up to 35. But yes, absolutely. Look at those. Same thing with that RSI, that kind of weakening of momentum on the downside that it seemed to have had as it went down. And we thought we could get a recovery. Unfortunately, at this stage right here, it looks like that recovery may be over, but we'll see where it goes. But absolutely. And so if we were to push below yesterday's lows, I would think we're at least falling back down to 30, and might most likely maybe even further than that.
All right, one more quick question for you here, and I know you follow the individual stocks and the results of their trials and whatnot. Is there anything on the broad regulatory front? We don't have a presidential election for a little bit here. Obviously, Obamacare has been good for these stocks. Is there anything on a regulatory front that could change, the momentum in the biotech sector?
Not anything that I'm seeing. Now in all fairness, I pay attention to the more of the broader. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised if those that are deeper into the biotech space have some issues like that they're concerned with. But when you pan out on the broader scale, nothing really that I'm seeing that worries me. No.
Okay. All right. Christian Tharp, Market Find Maven and the author of the 5-Star Stock Watch, joining us here on the Best of Biotech. Christian, great input. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, Christian.